Hey, this is Trissa from Sewing in Things, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to do the placket hack with the Constance. Basically, I'm mashing the placket from the Movie Night Pajamas, but for this one, if you can see, it's a little bit thicker. I actually used the kids placket for this because I wanted it a little bit thicker, and the women's Movie Night Pajamas, the placket is thinner, which is totally fine. But for the hood, since the hood top stitching is already thick, I wanted it to kind of match and be thick as well. So I used the kids placket for this. I believe it was size 2 that I used. But yeah, you can make yours longer or shorter, thinner. It's up to you, and you really could use any placket pattern that you have, but the Movie Night Pajamas are free. You just need the code in the Sew a Little Seam Facebook group. But yeah, so stay tuned and I will show you how to do this. For the placket hack, I'm going to be using the kids' Movie Night Pajamas for my placket because that is a little bit thicker than the women's version. But to start off, you need to grab your Constance neckband and then also the neckband of the Movie Night Pajamas, the placket version. And then also you'll want to grab some tracing paper or some regular paper, doesn't really matter. So essentially you'll trace your Constance neckband, or if you print it out, don't cut it out yet. You'll take your Movie Night placket neckband, basically right where it starts to round, you basically draw that on to your Constance. That way it'll look like this. And the added rounded part is about 3/4 of an inch. And so that'll give you a gauge about how much you'll need to extend it. And then add that. And so that will be your new placket neckband. But I'm going to be doing a hood instead of a neckband. So you'll be doing basically the same thing as I am, except with your neckband piece rather than the hood. But we're going to start off by getting your front piece, which I've already ironed on my interfacing. And then you'll also need to add interfacing on your placket pieces, which I have already done. So to find the center for your center front, it's best to fold it in half and then press it. That way you have a nice fold line, and then iron your interfacing right on top of that. So we're going to start off by taking our front and back pieces. We're going to take our front and back pieces and sew them together along the shoulder seam. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back. With both of your shoulder seams sewn, we're now going to start the placket by sewing along the outside of your placket interfacing with your sewing machine. And make sure the points around the bottom of your placket are nice and straight. Make sure there's a nice right angles because it will determine how straight your placket is at the end. So make sure you are careful and you do that nice and straight. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back. The reason you don't want to go inside of your placket is because when we sew our actual placket, it'll end up being too small and you'll get bunching on the bottom. And so you want to make sure that you're going outside, just outside of your placket interfacing. As you can see here, my thread's gray, so it kind of blends in. But and there's the right side. But once you do that, open up your shirt so the back is out of the way. We are now going to clip our shirt. We're going to go straight down the front, stopping about a 1/2 inch from the bottom, and then we're going to go towards each corner. You want to cut close to, but not through your stitches. And you want to make sure that you get close to your stitches. If you end up getting any puckering when we go to a later step, that just means you're going to need to clip a little bit closer to your stitches. Again, just make sure you don't go past those stitches. We're going to take both of our pieces and we're going to press that outside edge in 3/8 of an inch on both sides. And then we are going to essentially press it in half to make our placket piece. So go ahead and do that on both of your placket pieces, and then we'll come back. Now take one of your placket pieces, open it up. You're going to match up the raw edges. You're going to sew along this fold line and make sure you stop when you get to the end of your interfacing on your shirt. Depending on how well you cut out your shirt front and how well you ironed on your placket interfacing in the center, what I like to do is make sure I match up the fold line to the stitches. And so that way my placket is going to be the right size. Because if it's a little bit bigger or smaller, it'll affect your placket. And just occasionally checking to make sure that my fold line is on those stitches. But yeah, so now I'm going to go ahead and sew that on both sides, and then I'll come back. Once both of these have been sewn on, you want to make sure that you actually did sew along the actual stitches. If you come outside of the stitches at all, you may end up with some puckering on the bottom. So if you need to remove any stitches, go ahead and do that now, since it'll be easier to fix it before you start sewing any further. But once those are all done, we want to go ahead and press all the seams in towards the center. We want to make sure you keep this center fold. So go ahead and press both of those, and then we'll come back. Since I am adding a hood to my top instead of a neckband, I'm going to start off by prepping my hood. So I have my outside hood and then my hood lining. So I'm going to start off by sewing along the curve on both of my hoods, and then I'll come back. With both hood pieces sewn, go ahead and set your lining aside if you are making a lined hood. So now we are going to take our hood piece, and we're going to press this outside edge by 3/8 of an inch all the way around. This also is where a hem gauge is helpful, but we're going to press this all the way down by 3/8 of an inch, and then again by 1 inch. So give that a nice good press, and then we'll come back. Once that has been pressed, if you are doing an unlined hood, just put a bunch of pins all the way around and top stitch that. And if you're going to be adding grommets, make sure you add those before you sew this on. If you're doing the lined version, we're going to put our lining wrong sides together inside of our hood, and we're basically going to match up this raw edge along this fold line. And I like to nest my hoods together. That way I don't get a really, really bulky seam. So I'm just going to place this hood right along. Well, I should trim this first. Right along that with their nest together. And then fold this down and add a pin or a clip as you go. I like to do pins, that way I can make sure I get that fold, that second fold, staying down. I'm also going to come here at the edge and start here. See, and then just fix it. Make sure it's all going up to that fold line. Fold it down and pin it really good That way it doesn't twist at all when you're sewing it on. And then you do the same thing to the other side. Again, I like to start at the bottom. Once that is all pinned, go ahead and sew that on, and then we'll come back. With your hood all top stitched, go ahead and grab your bodice. And now you're going to take your hood or your neckband, and you want to place it so the point is just past the fold line. That way when you sew it on with your 3/8 of an inch, it'll meet up with that seam allowance. So essentially you're just going to fold it over just enough to where 3/8 of an inch and your hood or your neckband will match. Then you're going to fold this over. And I suggest basting this on at 3/8 of an inch. And then you can check it to see if you need to adjust it before you sew it all on. And it also makes it easier to go through your sewing machine with it basted first. Once this is basted on, you now want to match up your quarter points all the way around your hood or neckband. Helps if you mark your pins beforehand. And match up those pins. Now we're going to do the same thing we did on the other side. Make sure your band is slightly past that neck, that fold line. That way when we fold it over, that end of your neckband or your hood will match up at our 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And again, I like to base this on just because it makes it a little bit easier when sewing it on. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back. Once those placket pieces are basted on, I like to go ahead and add just a few more pins in between the pins, just so it's a little bit easier to sew on. Now go ahead and sew this on all the way around the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we'll come back. With our neckband or hood now all the way sewn on, go ahead and flip your placket around on both sides. Now you're going to fold that placket so it just covers past your previous stitches. Make sure you pin on the right side. And then we're going to go ahead and sew along this edge with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we'll do that on both sides of our placket, and then we'll come back. With both of those top stitched, you're now going to take the right placket or the left side when looking at it over the right, or over the left, I mean, and then you're going to tuck everything under. And then we're going to be sewing along the triangle. Make sure everything is lined up nice and straight before you sew. And then once it's satisfactory, go ahead and sew along that triangle on the inside. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back. With the bottom of your placket sewn on here, you now can add a little X square at the bottom. However, the last time I did a placket, it was really hard to get that first buttonhole sewn on. So I'm going to sew my buttonholes on first and then sew this little block. So typically your first buttonhole will be close to the top, and then your bottom one will be an inch from the bottom, and then you'll space them in between. However, I'm just going to do 2 buttonholes, one approximately here and one approximately here. And I'm going to do this size, though this is not the button I'm going to be using. I need to go to the store and go pick some up. But I'm going to do some big chunky buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those buttonholes on, and then do my little X, and then we'll come back. Once that is all sewn on, don't forget to add a little bit of fray check before you cut open your buttonholes, and then add your buttons, and then you're ready to sew the rest of your Constance. To stay up to date on the latest videos, be sure to subscribe to my channel, or you can check out my blog at sewingandthings.com.